everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxi.
And today we're going to do another speculation video about the future of something on film.
The future of something on film and the past of something on film affecting the future of something on film.
That's true. We've been doing a lot of these sorts of things lately because of, I mean, this has been a really big year, of course, for superhero movies, and a lot of things that we want to speculate about moving forward. Since Batman vs. Superman, we haven't really sat down, Steve, and had a lengthy conversation like the one that I did with Dan on Spider-Man about what the future of this franchise might be, although you did do a half an hour, 45-minute one with Eric on Suicide Squad.
Yeah, Eric and I talked a lot about that movie specifically, and I think we did that before Batman vs. Superman even came out. So some of those.
Oh no, that was after. I'm talking about when we got the news of the reshoots.
Oh yeah.
And so some of what we're going to talk about today has been covered a little bit here and there on the channel, but we had a lot of kind of breaking news this week about some specific films and about the future of DC on film in general, including the fact that there is a whole division now that has been created, and this needed to happen. I think, called, I think just DC Films, that's supposed to be kind of their analog for Marvel Studios.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of WB shakeups, and it seems like Warner Brothers and DC are trying to attempt to get their ducks in a row, and we'll talk about all of that.
There's so much drama and intrigue, Steve.
I want a documentary, man. I want 20 years down the line, there needs to be a documentary on the post-Batman vs. Superman days of Warner Brothers.
Absolutely. I bet it's fascinating behind closed doors there right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the big thing I want to know, and this will segue beautifully into our talking first about what happened with Batman vs. Superman and that fallout, I want to know what the conversations have been like and the overall mood surrounding Zack Snyder.
Yeah, that's been interesting. We know we've gotten reports here and there of Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers execs butting heads with each other, mostly because of what happened with Batman vs. Superman. And we know that there's been lots and lots of vocal comic book writers and people that have worked in film industries previously that have just been outright attacking Zack Snyder over that movie. So he is one of the most hated people in those rooms right now.
And he's the guy who's still helming Justice League.
Yep.
There was certainly some talk, not from anybody working at Warner Brothers, as far as I know, but there certainly was a lot of speculation among the fans, especially people that really didn't like Batman vs. Superman, that maybe he would get bumped off that project, even though it was about to start filming in a couple of weeks. And I kind of didn't think that would happen. I figured there'd be too many balls in the air. But the big question I have about that for you, Steve, what do you think? Is even though he's still directing that movie, how much control do you think he has? Might he be almost a figurehead director at this point? Is that even plausible? Or would the balls be in the air to the degree that he's the guy underneath them doing too much of the juggling?
I think it's the latter, and that's the interesting part, is because if he was just going to be a figurehead director and they wouldn't really need him with the way they're reshaping things, there'd be no reason why they wouldn't have kicked him out publicly. Because he's made 2 movies back-to-back that have been extremely polarizing. Whether you like them or not, the public at large has had very mixed reactions to these films in general. And the fact that Batman vs. Superman didn't break $1 billion and most people are attaching Snyder's name to that failure. If Snyder was the kind of person that you could just turn into a figurehead, there'd be no reason to keep him on, period. So I think what we have here is Snyder either knows too much of the secrets or has so much in his head that isn't on paper yet that they can't afford to get rid of him without losing a lot of money in the pre-production for Justice League that kicked up before Batman vs. Superman even hit theaters.
And man, if that's the case, that makes me a little bit nervous for that movie.
Oh no, I absolutely agree with you. It's going to be one of those things where there might be a little design by committee thing. There might be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle syndrome where there's so much reaction as it's being produced that it keeps altering what it is to try and find its own identity.
Yeah, well, one thing, and I just thought of this, that's going to be really interesting with Justice League is to see how much of the production of that we're allowed to know about. versus Batman versus Superman, because I've made no bones about the fact that I thought that the marketing for that movie was a little bit too much like Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
And that we just knew too much before we went in. And I got my hopes up pretty hard with that movie because of a lot of what we got to see before of it, but also felt a little bit deflated because of the Doomsday reveal and stuff like that. And but especially, well, that and Zod. And you know, the Zod blood thing, and you know, it being pretty obvious where all that was going. And I still submit that even though it's a really clunky, bizarrely pasted together film, if people didn't know as much about it as they did, I think there might have been slightly less backlash. I'm not sure. I think the critics still would have hated it, but I think a lot of fans might have gone a little bit easier on it. Because some of that that is played as big reveals in that movie are kind of neat ideas, if nothing else, that we already knew about.
Yeah, there's been a weird mystery when that movie was coming out, because we knew it was heavily Dark Knight Returns inspired. Ultimately, it didn't that sort of didn't function into the story as much as people thought it was going to originally. And part of the fun with that movie was, we don't know where this is going post Man of Steel. There's so many balls in the air. There's so many things that this potential confrontation could be. And then the trailers kept giving you more and more concrete evidence to the point where there's nothing to connect the dots anymore. Yeah. If you saw that last Doomsday trailer, you know the story of that whole movie. You're just going there for individual scenes that connect those action sequences.
And at that point, the only thing they were able to surprise us with, and obviously spoilers for that movie, you really shouldn't be listening to this video if you've not seen that, probably. But I mean, you know, feel free, whatever you want to do. But spoilers for that movie. The only thing that blindsided us with that was Death of Superman.
Yeah, that was really the only thing, and I feel like...
I don't think anybody saw that coming. Like, even though Doomsday was there, did you hear anybody that you listened to, or any of our friends, or any of your friends, like anybody we talked to, that you've talked to, did you hear anybody predict that?
I've heard some people guess it.
Really? Okay.
I heard some people guess it. A lot of that got laughed off as there's no way they're going to kill Superman in the second movie, especially after we haven't established his character. And then that gets into the whole thing of, well, they still didn't establish character, but they think he did.
Yeah, and then, well, I mean, let's not sit here and re-review that movie, of course, because you and I are apt to do that. But I'm just saying that's the only thing that blindsided us. So might they be a lot more hush-hush about Justice League? Do you think they should? Like, what's the strategy here? Or can you even really, you know, make a call on that, suggest anything, not knowing what the movie looks like?
I feel like it's impossible to make this movie and not be reactionary.
Yes.
And I figure...
And to some degree, you should be.
You should be, but
yes, like, you probably shouldn't go full steam ahead in that direction.
Yeah, I think...
You gotta find a way to segue it into something that, at the very least, is more cohesive.
Yeah, my thing would just be, if I was the guy in charge of Warner Brothers, I would take the sunk cost and put Justice League out later until they can find a way to, like, get themselves away from the word of mouth and all of the backlash to Batman versus Superman, so that film isn't affected by it inherently.
Wow, so you'd put it off. Well, here's where I don't know if I 100% agree with you. The fact that they're already going to have two movies in between might be, especially if either of them is really good, might be enough to soften that blow.
No, I agree with you. It's just, my thing would just be that because Justice League's being made as those discussions are happening, it's going to be very hard for it to not have a strained production history if it's constantly having, like, up and down hills of communication with fans. Like, if you start the movie's production with everyone hates Batman versus Superman, and then everyone loves Suicide Squad, so you go back to what you originally planned, and then say everyone hates Wonder Woman, then you go back to being reactionary again. Like, there's too much time in between for the public reaction to be too up and down, for that movie to be anything, for that movie to be itself.
Any way you slice it, it seems like with the team, I say the team, with Snyder helming it, any way you slice it, that movie is likely to be as mired in production difficulty as Batman vs. Superman was.
Yeah, probably more.
I kind of don't see any way around it unless Ben Affleck being a producer means anything.
And I don't know how much it does,
Yeah, hard to tell.
because what we have with the reports is that essentially Ben Affleck is not only executive producer now, but he's going to assist with rewrites of the movie, and he was extremely disappointed with the reception to Batman versus Superman. And he's got lots of pull now, you know, like he's an Academy Award winning director. He's a big shot. He can do what he wants with these
A
things.
lot of us predicted early on, and this is not an impressive prediction by any stretch of the imagination, that as soon as he got pulled on, he was likely uh, to be named as a director or a writer or both on one of these really quickly. In fact, I think a lot of people thought he might even direct Justice League right away.
Yeah, I heard some talk about that. A lot of people when he was cast were saying that the only reason they cast him as Batman is because they wanted him to direct a future DC film, whether it be Justice League or Batman.
It's going to be interesting, Steve, because that could have been the very best choice they made.
Yeah, I
And
agree with you.
for Batman v Superman, it already has been, because most people, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouths, most people that vehemently despised that movie, the one positive they could throw in was Ben Affleck was the right casting, which is ironic because 2 years ago when we heard about that casting, the main thing that people complained about that project was not they're going Dark Knight, was not we're afraid it's going to be too dark, was not Lex Luthor, it was, oh my god, Ben Affleck, you mean Daredevil?
Yeah, people were more excited for Jesse Eisenberg as Lex than they were for Ben Affleck as Batman.
And that's and that was a decision that has really hurt them, at least in the fan communities. I think that's one of the things that people go to as a cheap shot real quick in complaining about that movie. I still submit that his take on it is interesting. I actually don't have a problem with his performance really.
I have a
Myself.
way with he's directed, but again, we don't want to review that movie. But
Yeah, right. I'm just saying that I'm still interested to see Jesse Eisenberg reprise that role with better material.
I'll agree with you there. I think part of, because to get back to the Ben Affleck thing, I think part of what DC is doing, and I think smartly so, is that they've got Terrio to write. Terrio is already a collaborator with Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck's executive producer on Justice League. He's doing his own Batman movie, and one of the people with Jeff Johns that's running this going forward, John Berg, is a guy that's worked with Affleck consistently. So it's sort of becoming de facto Affleck's universe.
Yeah. Which is
they're-
somewhat not surprising, A, because of the reasons you gave before, that they brought him on because he's a creator, because he's a well-known creator now, as much or more than he is as an actor. But B, I think because it's Batman.
Yeah.
And so people liked his interpretation of Batman, even if they didn't like what the script was doing and what Snyder was doing. And if people, especially because Warner's and DC have a history of relying really heavily on Batman for any DC thing that remotely features him.
Right.
And if people liked Affleck's Batman, then they're going to fall back on Batman and they're going to fall back on Affleck.
Yeah. I mean, Batman's been the biggest moneymaker for DC in general, so it's hard not to break that habit, especially when you have a guy like Ben Affleck in the role who can kind of just do whatever he wants at this point in Hollywood. Like, if he wants to make a movie, the people will let him do it. There's no, like, pitching process for that guy anymore. He's got carte blanche.
That's it, yeah. Which is interesting because he doesn't seem to have that reputation outside of Hollywood as much as you'd think he would.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. It's like, it seems like film goers and people inside the industry know and appreciate him. Everyone else doesn't seem to. Everyone I talk to that isn't really into, like, film in general seems to still remember him as, like, the guy from Jersey Girl.
And that just means that they haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
And with
but
respect, the films he's making are not the sorts of films that diehard action movie superhero people are necessarily going to.
Oh yeah, definitely so. None of the big name actors we have in either Marvel or DC or Fox's universe, aside from maybe like Mark Ruffalo and sometimes Chris Evans, none of them are really making like artsy movies.
Yeah, you're not going to art house pictures to see those people.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that they got Affleck there, and I think that just goes to more of the cultural thing of like it's no longer the case that we take people and make them superheroes and then they turn into stars. It's that stars want to be superheroes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean that it happens both ways now, right?
Yeah.
Like we certainly are getting new blood and new talent and immediately turning them into superstars with, especially at Marvel, with movies that are really popular. That's going to happen with Spider-Man.
Right.
But Steve, mark my words, his Batman is going to be more of a Batman character piece than you've ever seen before.
Oh no, I agree with you. I feel like if anything in this universe that I have absolute confidence in, it's Ben Affleck writing and directing a Batman movie that he is also starring in.
That's
There's no
I,
way that can be bad.
Yeah, no way the script can be bad. Now, whether or not Warner Brothers allows him to bring it straight off of his page exactly the way he wants to is potentially a different ballgame. But the fact that, but as you say, I don't think they're gonna tie his hands behind his back that hard, because he is kind of their only ace in the hole right now from their perspective.
Yeah, I mean
him and Jeff Johns.
Yeah, him and Jeff Johns. For the most part, Ben Affleck is Warner Brothers' golden boy, and Jeff Johns is DC's golden boy, and so putting them together would seem like it'd be an easy choice.
I think, especially if the Batman is really good, it would be really smart of Warner's to have of DC Films now to have Ben Affleck write and direct a movie that is not starring him.
That would be interesting.
I think that'd be a really cool coup. So that they aren't looking too much like all they care about is Batman.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what property of like their current list of material that he'd be good for. But
I don't either. I don't. Nothing is leaping to mind, but it might be cool. It might be cool if we don't have the same director necessarily always doing a franchise. If we were to make, say, a Wonder Woman 2 or a Suicide Squad 2, which I think they've maybe already confirmed. I forget. I know
we've talked about Suicide Squad 2 being a possibility.
Spin-off. It's funny that they've talked about that, and they've just greenlit a Harley Quinn spin-off. That movie's not even out yet, and there's already like probably 2 movies based on it.
Yeah,
coming afterwards. But it might be interesting to have him tackle a character that's been tackled already, even.
Yeah, a character that's already been tackled. I figure he'd be a good person to give something like Suicide Squad to if David Ayer doesn't want to come back, because he can do the psychological drama thing more in line with the Ostrander stuff. And I mean, if you want just dreams that will never come true, Ben Affleck doing a Question movie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that my mind immediately goes to that street level stuff. I think if you did, and this is not an outside of the ballpark possibility, I don't think, given that we're getting a Flash movie and we have the popular Flash TV show, I say give him a Green Arrow movie. I think Ben Affleck trying to separate out the difference between Batman and Green Arrow is a really good idea.
And interestingly, because Green Arrow is a much more inherently political character, and he isn't on Arrow, and if they wanted, like the Flash, go in a different direction than the shows and go back to like the comic book political Green Arrow, Ben Affleck's kind of the right guy for that. He's got very specific political views.
Yeah, and I think that if they want to, again, if the movies get a little bit more grounded, and when I say grounded, I don't mean realistic, I mean more character-driven, if once we get them to that place, one of the ways that would be really smart for DC Films to compete with Marvel Studios is to thoughtfully do that political stuff well.
Yeah.
Because we're doing that all over the place on Marvel, and in Marvel, and I'm not hearing very many people at all complaining, oh man, these movies aren't fun anymore, they're too political, they're not escapist enough. Isn't that really interesting that those movies have been tackling a lot of major current issues and doing it in such a way where they still feel escapist enough for a person to go eat a bucket of popcorn and enjoy it the same way they would have, say, Spider-Man 2002.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things of like, it just represents a difference in strategy between Marvel and DC, where Marvel had established escapist, fun character pieces, and then gradually built to the deeper, darker, more emotional political stuff. And so
but they seeded it. It was there from the beginning.
Yeah, they seeded it. I mean, they knew they were going in that direction to some degree, but they let us naturally get there to the point where people aren't going to Captain America Civil War simply because they want to see Captain America and Iron Man beat the crap out of each other. There is like an attachment to those characters, and there are people picking sides.
And understand, folks, this is not me pitting one studio against another studio, and I'm just calling it like I'm seeing it. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be, whether you individually like a lot of those movies a lot or not, that seem to be working for the public at large. You've got a lot of record breaking still going on at Marvel. You had a really fast. Wait, has it broken $1 billion yet? Civil War.
Yep, as of this recording, it just broke them.
Yeah, you had that happened quick. There's obviously a lot of stuff that is resonating with people, and I'm not saying that DC. So I'm not saying yay Marvel, boo DC, and they have this is unsalvageable, and they have no possible way to pull themselves out of the rut that they're in. And I do think that it is somewhat of a rut. Warner's would agree with me.
Yeah,
the way that they're handling things. And so I'm not saying that I don't want to see. My whole point is I want to see DC find their own identity and make really good but smart superhero movies. And did I say Marvel? I meant DC. And I still think that there is potential for that. And I'm also not saying that they have to make political movies. I think that Batman vs Superman thinks that it's poignant and about current now issues, and that it is trying to sort of do some of that. So they don't have to go that way, but I do think that they want to be somewhat politically charged. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, and maybe this would just be me playing devil's advocate for DC, because I recognize the problem state they're in. Because if you look at the Marvel films, you look at Marvel versus DC as two comic book companies, Marvel is inherently in the comics more dark, more political, and DC isn't.
Yeah.
DC's always been more mythological to begin with. The problem...
Well, they have been more lately, and you can certainly point to a lot of examples in especially like the early 2000s and stuff, but you're right, by and large, their history.
Yeah, exactly. It's been more of a reactionary thing, right? Like, because DC became darker with Identity Crisis in the mid-2000s because they were reacting to Marvel. But I think part of the problem for DC is Marvel's gotten to this place with their characters where they're kind of doing what I see as usually being a DC thing. Like, Captain America is Superman. Age of Ultron is what I want in a Justice League movie.
You're saying that those have been somewhat reactionary to DC properties.
Exactly. So, like, it's weird to see, like, Marvel do this DC thing and DC having to not be like Marvel, and that would require them not to be like the inherent spirit of their source material. So
see, I would make the argument that we're noticing that because the DC characters so far in the two in continuity DC extended universe movies, that we've had, have not really lived up to yet the characters that we know. And there's been obviously with Man of Steel, I had very much a wait and see attitude. Well, we can get him there. This is very much an origin picture. And then we got to Batman vs Superman, and it hasn't happened yet, and it's just weird because then we killed him. But I don't know that Marvel was. I think you and I are reacting to that, saying, see, they're getting the optimistic superhero right with Captain America, but I don't think that the filmmakers there are saying we don't have a good Superman and that needs to happen. So I think I honestly think their Captain America and their Iron Man are just true to those characters. But or at least with Captain America. I mean, Iron Man's somewhat of a reinvention, but that's understandable because of the lack of public interest in that character.
See, I'd argue both though, because I don't. Okay. I like Chris Evans as Captain America a lot, but I don't think Chris Evans Captain America is comic book Captain America. Same way I don't think Downey Iron Man is comic book Iron Man.
Okay. Well, and you've read more of that stuff than I have.
It's just more of like a thing with. Because in the comics, Captain America is inherently more of a gritty thing, more of a soldier drama kind of thing.
Well, that's a good point. I do kind of keep forgetting about that.
In the movies, you don't really have that. The movies, they do a really good job of making him more of like an embodiment of an ideal. Captain America's not really that in the comics.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons. Well, maybe certain interpretations, but you're right. That maybe the main one, which is interesting because you had criticism of First Avenger when he's like knocking people off of planes and throwing knives and stuff.
Right.
And we have to remind ourselves, oh yeah, he's a soldier. But they're giving us this much more, optimistic Superman-type Captain America.
Yeah, it's partly just in the way Evans plays him with a different personality. But like he's still doing the things Captain America in the comics would do. It's just Evans plays it like he's acting as Superman. If you go back and you watch Age of Ultron and Avengers, Whedon, every time he directs Chris Evans, he very consciously puts Chris Evans in postures that are Superman reminiscent. He's always predominantly wearing, outside of costume, blue.
Wow.
He's got like his hands on his hips or his arms crossed. He's very consciously being directed to act like Superman,
Okay.
even if the actions themselves aren't there.
I'll tell you, that is not an interpretation that I had considered.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. But I mean that's part of the thing with DC. It's like it's very hard for them in the public consciousness now to make a Superman movie that's true to Superman's spirit without seeming like for the general public that they're copying Captain America.
And there's a sentence you never thought you'd say.
Exactly. I never thought I'd live in a world where Captain America and Iron Man would break $1 billion and Batman and Superman didn't.
And not just making a lot of money, but resonating with people and feeling really socially relevant.
Right? I mean, I can talk to anyone on the street and they can tell me about Captain America and Iron Man, their origins and their conflict before they can tell me about Batman and Superman's now. It's crazy.
They could probably, even if they don't realize this is what they're articulating, tell you about the differences in their ideologies and why they don't fall on the same side in Civil War.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I have seen people that go to movies simply for popcorn, turn your brain off action that are talking about Civil War through with its themes and with its character dichotomies. Like they are not conscious of it, but they are picking sides based on political thematic through lines for those movies.
Let me ask you a question, and I'm getting off the beaten path a little bit here. We'll get off the gravel road and get back on Highway 40 here in a second. But I want to ask you this question. Do you think if you took this Captain America and you suddenly gave him heat vision and flight and super breath and super hearing and all of Superman's powers, that people would suddenly say, "Oh, he's too powerful. I cannot relate to him"?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so at all, because I think we've, from the very beginning with Captain America, the first shot of Captain America, of Steve Rogers in First Avenger, is scrawny Steve Rogers. The last shot of Captain America in First Avenger is a picture of scrawny Steve Rogers. We have been building and building and building on this idea of Steve Rogers is the person and Captain America is simply the means to which he can do more good with the person he already is. I don't think people would say if you gave him more power he'd be unrelatable, because he's already super powerful, and almost all of the drama he's always doing is focused on his interpersonal relationships and him being a part of the world.
It's all internal drama, internal conflict, excuse me. And
Right.
so we're like, most of the time, we're not really fearing for Captain America's safety. And there's this weird assumption, and I think you and I have talked about this a lot before. There's this weird assumption that people have that Superman can't be a relatable character, a resonating character, because you can't put him in conflict. You can't put him in a place where we fear for his safety without a plot device. And I think people are scared of Superman. I think that like writers tend to say he's a really hard character to write, but Captain America, there weren't really expectations.
Yeah, they had a really good chance to define that character for a new generation without having to worry about baggage in the public consciousness. Like no one remembers the 90s Captain America movies, but everyone remembers the Christopher Reeve movies.
And so he's that ideal, and people say, oh, that's unrealistic with Superman. But then you have it with Captain America, and because he's a real person, because he feels like a real person, and he's constantly, the world is constantly pushing against his ideals, and it's difficult for him to keep them, but he continues to try, and usually manages it. We respect him and we care about him and he resonates with us, and I think you could have that with Superman. Now, at the same time, I also think that the version of Superman that we had in Man of Steel going into Batman vs. Superman, that is this much more conflicted and jaded and confused Superman who's not to that ideal place yet because he's so overwhelmed and just doesn't know what to do with himself. With a movie that was more thoughtful about those things, a story that was more just cohesive and getting and like First of all, just one scene feels like it naturally moves into the next scene so that we're not constantly feeling like the reset button is being hit and we don't know why we're even looking at things that are happening. So that's the first thing. That's the basic foundation. Storytelling 101. One thing should lead naturally into the next, or you should at least know that you're looking at different subplots that might later converge. That's a thing. But more than that, just getting into his head, understanding where he's coming from, and realizing that it is possible to get us to that place. I am not begrudging that, and I think it might have been a really, really interesting and cool risk, and it just hasn't paid off. Could that have worked? I mean, barring killing him before he's really Superman, because I take major issue with that. Like I don't know that you can do that, but maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm really open-minded. Is the thing.
The thing with Man of Steel, for me at least, is it's not my Superman. At the same time, though, I could see how this version could become a great character and a great Superman, and I really respect the way they were trying to go about it, of trying to make a more cynical world, informing a child that eventually becomes Superman, and how he has to like break from humanity and still be connected to it. Like there's a much more interesting psychology to the Man of Steel version of Superman that you could play with.
Well, and compare that to the movie Captain America, who grew up in the 40s.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's lots of ways to distinguish those two characters and make Superman more relatable and make Superman more about his ideals without having to just do the Christopher Reeve thing again of he's just a perfect person. I think part of the problem, though, especially with Man of Steel, is that's not a film that's really aware of what it's saying with certain scenes.
I think the same thing is true of its sequel.
Batman vs. Superman definitely has. I think with Man of Steel more so is Man of Steel thinks it's got to a character arc that is the opposite of what it was actually doing. I think that's a movie that should very much have been more Earth 1 than it already was. And it's already a massively Earth 1 story, but I think it missed the point of Earth 1, where Superman has to realize that his sort of detachment is not human, and it's just him being angsty because he was raised on Earth and that he already has an inherent connection to humanity, and that's why he cares about people, and that's why people are willing to help him, because he's just a person. And we don't get inside of his head enough to work with that. And I think I could even be okay with going to Batman vs. Superman and killing him off immediately before he really becomes Superman if I was like Captain America, more with how he sees the world.
Yeah.
Because Captain America First Avenger is has two different tones. It's got the actual tone of World War II, and it's got all of the events filtered through Steve Rogers' lens of being hopeful and optimistic. And it plays with that a lot with Red Skull and Captain America. Man of Steel, in a lot of ways, should have been the same thing of Superman sees the world one way and it is actually another, and those two things have to converge for him to become Superman. And it never quite does that.
Well, Steve, give me your odds. Give me a percentage on this. What are the chances that when we see the 4-hour ultimate cut of Batman vs. Superman, that more of that was there, and that when he dies, we have we have more of an understanding of who this character is, at the very least, if not a somehow more altruistic version, although, like, perhaps there are missing scenes where he was getting to that place, and then the movie is supposed to make us think that it's earned it when he moves away from that. When he goes up against Batman, or when his mother gets kidnapped.
Yeah. I feel like, as far as a percentage goes of whether or not that cut would fix the thing, I'd say more like leaning towards like 30-40%. I really don't think just having more scenes explaining progression of the plot would have ultimately made that movie a better movie, or made it a better character study, because some of the biggest plot holes with that movie you can't just fix by adding a scene. Mm-hmm. Some of the biggest issues with that, like the biggest issue of that movie, is that Batman and Superman never actually fight. It is a manipulated tool versus a guy with his own agenda, and the fight is just contrived. No matter how many scenes you add in to explain why Batman's being manipulated or why Superman is going to him, it doesn't make that fight resonate on an emotional or like philosophical level. It just doesn't.
So extra hour and a half, what's there?
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, even more so, why did they who cut it? Like, was it Warner Brothers? Was it Zack Snyder? Was it Chris Terrio? Like, where did all that go and who's responsible for it?
Um, were we making up big, giant, bombastic action scenes as we went along?
I'm not sure.
What's going on? Like, how would you, to a point you made before we were recording, Steve? Because I don't want to take credit for this point. Why are we not sticking to a script? Like, how are we making this movie? Why would you make a script that you knew you'd have to cut an hour and a half out of?
Yeah, and I was talking to Eric, and he made the point of, as far as movies like this go, big action sequences that last like half an hour, like the Doomsday fight, usually aren't in the script. So some of that you can get away with. At the same time, though, this is a movie that got
storyboarded.
Yeah,
I mean, anyway, yeah, they're not going to be in the script because you don't write that stuff. I mean, usually a script will be like, and then this fight happens, and you might get like a couple of, especially if it's a movie where there's actually story being told in an action scene. The way we ought to do it. If we're actually using action to serve the story, progress the story, you might have those plot. These things have to happen in this fight, but usually it's car chase. This person wins, this other person loses. That's what you see in a script, but they would still have to be planned. They would still have to be storyboarded. I mean, at some point, you got to be in the middle of this project, going, yeah, we're shooting too much.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go a level higher and just say that
the Daredevil director's cut isn't 3 hours long.
Yeah, I mean, 3 hours is already a lot, and then 4 hours for the original cut before everything was gone. But then even just like stepping back from the production level of 4 hours is 2 movies. You're making something that would demand obscene amounts of money. Did no one upstairs come down and say, "Why are you spending all this money?"
Especially because we know, as I said earlier, that it was mired in production difficulty. Stevie there?
Was never really intended to be there, and they decided to throw it in and act like the movie's longer than it is.
I'm sorry, Steve. You cut out on me for a while there.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, like, because we know they went through a lot of different script changes and delays and such. I wonder how much of that original 4-hour cut is just stuff that really actually doesn't need to be there. Like, how much of the footage of the 4-hour cut was shot before the delay versus after the delay.
Yeah, and I want to get into the kind of awkwardness, and this is a hang-up that I don't hear a lot of other people talking about, so maybe this is just me, Steve, but don't you find it a little bit awkward that you're going to have this much longer cut of a movie that is supposed to be setting up a grander universe that isn't technically canonical?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest.
I find that weird. Like, I can look at these things on with two minds to some degree. Although if it turns out to be like the Marvel movies have been, each of these will be somewhat of a chapter in a larger narrative, and so you have to look at the continuity. But I can look at that movie on its own and say these things work and these things don't, and look at it separate from that larger universe to some degree. If the director's cut ends up being a much better movie, then I can look at it and be like, that's the one I go back and watch. But it's gonna be awkward moving forward, especially because if that comes out, and again, I don't know that this will happen, but if that comes out and the fans go, okay, this is what should have been released in theaters with an intermission, like with that Offspring song in the middle of Smash, where it's like intermission, dun 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 dun, dun like there should totally be a movie that has that. But we're basically, you have a 4-hour Batman vs Superman movie, 2 hours of Batman, it's 2 hours of Superman. But if people end up liking that movie, that version a lot more, I have a hard time believing that we won't start in the movies after it referencing stuff that we didn't see in the theater. Or is that even a problem?
I think it is, because I mean, so much of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, with Zack Snyder especially, he has things in his mind that he thinks have been established but haven't actually. So I have this worry that we're going to get a scene in the 3-hour ultimate cut of Batman vs Superman where Lex Luthor explains like his master plan and talks about Doomsday and that whole thing with the Steppenwolf deleted scene, and that's referenced in Justice League, but we never actually see it in the theatrical cut. Like, I think that's going to be a danger, and I think that's a problem.
Especially because that's especially likely since he's the one making that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't understand which one is more canonical, and if you're going to release it like that, are you saying that the theatrical cut was never intended to be canonical?
Yeah. I mean, that's just... So anyway, that's gonna get really strange and awkward and could even confuse people and to the point where they get fed up with these and don't want to watch some of them. Potentially. Maybe. I don't know. We've got to see what happens with Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman, and let's go ahead and get into those. But before that, and I was going to save this point for later, but I think I'll make it now. I think, Steve, because I'm hearing a lot of people saying that they don't know if this universe is even salvageable. And the big question right now on my mind is, do movies moving forward ignore stuff that was really strange and wonky and at the very least fans didn't respond well to, or do we find a way to salvage those things and make them make more sense moving forward?
I figure that they're just going to ignore things. I figure we're going to get a Justice League movie and then a Ben Affleck directed Batman movie, and we're not even going to touch on the fact that Batman used to murder people. I think we're just going to completely drop those little idiosyncrasies of his character because no one liked it and it didn't work regardless of how they played it.
Here's the thing, and I've probably said this in places before. I might have even said this in our spoiler cast on that movie. I'm really not... And this is not a popular opinion, I am really not that concerned about the Batman murdering people thing. Because I don't think it actually happens in the movie. I think that just like with stuff in Man of Steel, those scenes are music videos and they don't count for the story and in Snyder's brain. I think that it will be very easy to ignore those things in later movies because nobody else seems to notice they happen in the movie you're watching. They're being ignored by the characters in the film. It only happens in action scenes, and no one discusses it.
I see where you're coming from. That my only counter to that, because I think you are right, but my only counter to that is, with Man of Steel, we have that with the Zod action scene, and then the Zod action scene turns into the defining character motivation for the opening of Batman vs. Superman for Bruce Wayne. So the moment you take an action scene and connect it to a character that makes that really hard to be consistent.
I disagree because that's a plot point. We are not doing that. We are doing that with characters besides Superman and Lois in that scene by not having a scene after it that deals with it in any way at all. And that feels like just this giant misstep where we're just ending the movie now, the end. You know, it feels like you read a storybook that had the last 3 pages ripped out of it and like the end page was there. Like, it was just the end. But with Man of Steel, I'm talking more about scenes like when he's throwing Kryptonians directly in the buildings, and then nobody seems to be noticing he's doing that, and that probably have people in them, and that you get to the end of the scene, and you've got the line from Guardian where he's like, "This man is not our enemy." I'm like, I don't know, I guess, like, you were off shooting someone else those times where he did things that were kind of questionable and sort of scary. So, like, I'm not really counting that scene where he kills Zod because that's a plot point, and it doesn't surprise me that we're talking about it a little bit in Batman vs. Superman. But again, especially because people complained about it, and so as you say, now we're in sort of damage control mode. But like you don't have that with the Batman stuff. At no point Batman actually killing someone or brutalizing them is a plot point.
Well, the thing with him branding him and then like not branding Lex.
That's talked about.
Right, but it's not talked about satisfactorily, and I feel like we're just going to ignore that. We're going to pretend like that never happens.
Okay, but here's the thing. That, and again, I don't think this works in that movie. But the movie thinks by the end. See, here we are reviewing this because there's no way to not talk critically about it as we're discussing where we might be going forward. When when so we have Alfred, of course, talking about the branding thing, like that's him going way too far, and the movie thinks that it has somewhat pacified Batman with what he's supposed to get from Superman's sacrifice. So, because the movie thinks it's gotten you to a place where he's going to be a team player now and build this team and stuff, I'm not saying that works. I'm saying that if we had a character arc that actually got us there, like the movie thinks we did, it would make sense to ignore that, or not ignore it, but to move forward and not have him still doing that or anybody talking about it, because he was supposed to get to a character plays.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'm just saying, that's a sticky wicket. I don't know that we need to be talking a lot about that moving forward.
Okay, no, that's fair. This goes back to, I think this will be a good way to progress forward with
Absolutely.
this.
Let's do that, shall we?
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say here then is, I think this all comes down to what I said earlier with Man of Steel, and then by extension Batman vs. Superman, of there being events that are written to lead to certain conclusions, but what we're being shown does not lead to that at all. Like, it's completely counter to those ideas, and that just goes to, I think, Zack Snyder being a really bad filmmaker.
And the problem is,
I don't think he knows how to tell a story.
I don't think storyteller.
Yeah, we talked about this, but I will go full on say Zack Snyder is a horrible director. He doesn't know how to direct. And because of that, it's really difficult to tell what plot points, what parts of the story, what character motivations we're supposed to latch onto and go forward with, and which ones we're supposed to ignore. And that's still my fear with Justice League. I think for the most part, the rest of the DC films will be safe from that, but because the foundation is so badly interpretative with Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel,
what is Justice League gonna set up that we have to deal with afterwards?
Exactly. Like, if I was, for example, if I was Ben Affleck and I'm making my Batman movie and I have to deal with Zack Snyder's Justice League, I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from that, for example.
Well, and again, we don't know what is going to be in that movie, and we don't know if there's going to be anybody there to try to ground him more this time. And I imagine there will be some sort of steps taken.
I imagine so as well. I mean, there's been lots and lots of stories now of Zack Snyder being at odds with everyone at DC, and that he's kind of in the penalty box, it seems.
Before we move forward, let me make this point that I needed to do this setup and preamble in order to make. People are worried that this is not salvageable, and I think that the Marvel movies are going to help a little bit. What I mean by that is, there's still a lot of people talking about like people being tired of superhero movies and burnout and all of that. But then you're seeing these characters with Marvel that people are really invested in and they want to see the next chapter in, and they're spending their money and they're going to those movies. I think most people, even if they really dislike Man of Steel and really dislike Batman vs. Superman, I think the majority of people that love these characters are gonna want to see them done well. I don't think anybody is necessarily, or very many people anyway, are rooting for this whole thing to fail now because Batman vs. Superman was bizarre. Or at the very least, I think we can. I think that we can potentially rope them back in. Like I'm just saying that if this is what we're stuck with, if there's no chance for a reboot of the DC extended universe anytime soon, and there's not. I mean, they've jumped in this minecart and they're downhill now. There they go. I think that people are gonna hope for the best. Am I too optimistic? I just like people that love Batman and Superman and are going to the Marvel movies because they think they're good and that's what they've got right now, but they weren't really Marvel people. I mean, that was me. They weren't really Marvel people. They were more fans of Batman and Superman. They're gonna want to see this work, even if it isn't right now. Am I wrong?
No, I agree with you. I think for the most part, people want this to be better. People want to see, because for me, when I said this during the spoiler cast, I don't feel like I've seen the Trinity on screen. I want another movie where that happens. And I think
it'll be trepidatious, no question about it. Moving forward.
People will be worried. Movies. I'm worried. I've completely lost interest with this universe, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to go in and see another movie hoping that they rope me back in. And I feel like a lot of people have that right now. I think The issue though is because Batman versus Superman turned out the way it did, because Man of Steel turned out the way it did, if DC comes out and makes a movie that's good, they're not going to get as many people on board. They need to come out swinging and make a movie that's great to have the impact that they want.
And that's the problem, is Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman can both be brilliant movies, but if Justice League looks like Batman versus Superman, they're in trouble.
Yeah, no, they need...
Because we might be in a fool me twice scenario.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I said restore confidence. I think they need to build confidence. They need to get to this place where people see the DC logo and either get interested or at least excited, something in that vein. Like now we can just sell a movie on Marvel. Who would have thought Guardians of the Galaxy would have been popular at all? To the point where Steven Spielberg says it's the best superhero movie ever.
You couldn't have led with it.
So, like, it's crazy that they can do that. DC needs to be able to do that. DC, with some of the most iconic characters in history, needs to be able to make people say, I'm going to see it because it's DC. And the only way to do that is to come out swinging and make great movies, not just good ones.
But I do think it's a really good thing that we've got movies in between. Because they have the potential to get people on board at least with the idea of going to more of them, where if everybody is talking about Suicide Squad, because the thing is, I think it's good that these things are separate and don't feature Batman and Superman heavily. I realize that he's going to have some sort of a cameo, if not a larger part, in Suicide Squad. Yeah. But Suicide Squad, and like they're banking, they were at least before banking on that, maybe they still are, as kind of a Batman thing. I mean, look how many of the villains come from Batman's Rogues Gallery. Yeah. But I think that it being separate enough from that stuff, if there's word of mouth and it's really good, people might go back in and take a chance on it, even if they really didn't like Batman vs Superman, and same thing with Wonder Woman. And so we could build steam and build momentum for Justice League, but I think Justice League, first of all, could be in trouble if nobody likes either of these movies. I mean, that could be a problem. But like, I don't know, man. That movie really needs to be, because like I said, like I don't want to sound hypocritical. I think people are gonna hope that it turns around and that they hear, word of mouth. Oh, where was I opening weekend? I guess I should have gone. But if everything's bad up to Justice League, they're in trouble.
And that's, again, why I say, if I was in charge of this, I would just push Justice League back. I would make it so we get, like, a pattern of good filmmakers making good films, and then after people realize the DC brand has good titles under it, then you make Justice League, and then you don't worry about the things that people hated with Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel.
Well, and excite them about those characters and make them invested in them, and then put them in a movie together. And that's not to say that you couldn't have done it backwards. I said at one time, when there was talk about Justice League being the foundation for their universe, where we would sort of, start with it, that if it's a really well put together origin picture, where maybe we don't do everybody's origins and we're already put together, or we do the origins but we're just really, really good about it, smart about it, and really confident in our storytelling and our characterization, that sure, maybe that could work. But now we're trying to do that. We're sort of trying to do that and pretend like we didn't do that. I don't know. Right? Like,
yeah,
where we sort of kind of introduced characters in Batman vs Superman, but we didn't introduce them. We just gave them cameos.
Yeah. I've never been opposed to the idea of just starting a DC universe with Justice League, and now they're in that weird place of they want to have their cake and eat it too, with like with smaller movies and then Justice League.
At least Wonder Woman will have given us presumably a character piece about that character.
Yeah, that would be the hope. Yeah, so I mean, and they think that Superman got his character piece. They think Batman got his character piece. So just being as charitable as possible, just pretending like we've established these three people and then we come to Justice League. I think Justice League, it could be the movie that pulls them out of the rut. I feel like if that's good and you give us a whole bunch of extra characters that people are really interested in, like Captain America, Winter Soldier did with Falcon, it's very easy to build off the universe and pretend like everything beforehand that people weren't excited about just didn't happen for you. But then part of it is just Zack Snyder should be off of it. There should be new blood here. There should be someone that actually has a vision and knows how to tell a story going forward, not constantly handcuffing a guy that has given you 2 movies that haven't performed the way you wanted them to.
That's true, but let me suggest something else, which is there was a time, of course, when I thought Zack Snyder was maybe a pretty good filmmaker. And that was when he was adapting things that he had hardly anything to do with the actual storytelling process, and he was simply interpreting them to the screen. And there's maybe been, and it's hard to tell, like too much undue criticism of Snyder over anybody else, where like all of the hate for what went wrong with that movie is put on him, and nobody's talking about Goyer.
Right.
And I've had people leave comments on videos where I've brought up Goyer and being like, no, it's Terrio's movie, and Goyer didn't have anything to do with it whatsoever, because he was there early on, but then Terrio came in and totally rewrote his script. And no, I think a lot of what Goyer did was still in that movie. At the very least, at the conceptual level. So let's be fair to this whole thing. It could be a Watchmen situation, where, I mean, maybe not quite that, because I'm sure that Snyder has had his hands in these pies going all the way up, where he's been influential on some of the storytelling process. But if this is Terrio's movie and he is pretty much just taking it, especially if he's slapped on the wrist by Warner Brothers and saying you better do his script, or smacked in the face with a Harley Quinn mallet, then we could get a pretty decent movie, because he could just be interpreting something that is completely written by a competent writer.
Right. Yeah, see, but then that goes back to what we were saying earlier of, does Zack Snyder have enough control or have enough pieces of the puzzle to where Warner Brothers could force him to do that? And if they have to force him to do that and they have that power, why not just fire him?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well,
it's just one of those things like, we don't...
And I don't want to talk in circles, but you're absolutely right, and that is the but that's my optimism, is that at least we have real new blood on that project.
Yeah, and I think it should be noted that according to some sources, the idea is Jeff Johns and Zack Snyder do actually have this entire universe planned out, which is partly why they aren't able to stop anywhere, is that all of the wheels have been in motion for a while. It just so happens that the first 2 trains didn't work. So if that's the case, and Snyder really knows as much as Jeff Johns does, if not more, then Jeff Johns getting more control could mean it's possible to push Snyder out. Yeah,
and I would be really surprised if he got another job with them after this.
I'm really surprised.
I think there's a good possibility that Justice League Part 2 is a horse of a totally different color.
Well, even Terrio says that he's not even sure if he's coming back to write Justice League Part 2. So the idea of making these a 2-parter, I think, is also fallen away.
I think Ben Affleck at some point is going to be directing everything. I think he'll be doing all of them.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. I feel like part of the issue here is there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen with Batman vs. Superman. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen with Justice League. And there's very vocal factions of fans that love and hate the direction that this is going in. And it's very hard for DC to just make movies.
Yeah.
Like with Man of Steel, like it or love it or hate it, it was them going in a direction, and it just didn't work for most people. But it was a vision. It was an idea. And then Batman vs. Superman became reactionary. And I feel like if they can kind of recapture the state of mind they had when they greenlit Suicide Squad and they greenlit Man of Steel, and just run with an idea for a while, maybe they won't have a problem.
So how concerned are you about the Suicide Squad reshoots?
I'm not worried, honestly. I'm not excited for that movie anymore, just because Batman vs. Superman put a weird taste in my mouth. I don't think Will Smith is good for Deadshot,
right.
and there's just lots of like personal gripes I have against the movie. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be a good movie. And the reshoots, the original rumor was it's going to be humor. David Ayer debunked that on Twitter, saying that no, it's just Warner Bros. Asked him, what else do you want in your movie? And I said more action. And then there's a new report that says that's not true either, that the reason it's costing millions of dollars is because the reshoots are there to help smooth out the third act. And that's true.
Whatever that means. But that,
yeah, whatever that means. And if that's true, though, I'm okay with it because I like David Ayer a lot, but almost all of his movies have bad third acts. I love Fury. It's a brilliant movie. That third act doesn't make any sense. And so
well, if that's the case, then it certainly isn't likely to ruin it.
Yeah, I mean, there's potential that the reshoots are there to make the movie work better. It's just a matter of we're so close to its release now, and those reshoots happen so recently that it's weird. It's weird for a movie that's basically in the can to go out and do that again.
Well, and it's also odd that David Ayer tried to debunk that, and you had a lot of people saying, well, obviously this is reactionary to Batman vs. Superman, and then he's like, and he wasn't responding directly to that idea, just to the it's not for humor. Don't worry, there's humor in our Suicide Squad movie with two characters that have clown motifs. Steve, are you there?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's getting a bit garbled.
I got sign going. Okay.
Yeah. But I think that turning out to not be true, and then like the idea being that we've got to smooth out this third act, it might be fine for that movie, but in that they might just need to do that. But the timing is still pretty convenient.
It's pretty convenient, and
I just think there's reason. I understand why people are concerned about that. Obviously, I'm just gonna go see the movie and see how it is. But there's reason to think that those didn't line up because of coincidence.
Yeah, and part of it's also that movies, for the most part, do factor in a budget of in case we need to go back and do reshoots. This is not that scenario. This is reshoots that were tacked on much later that were not there originally and is costing them millions of dollars. So there is something extensive going on that was not originally planned. And if that's the case, it's worrisome about the flow of that movie, and it's going to be odd. Like it might be like a fan-tastic thing of like you can tell it's been 6 months since people have been on set together in between certain scenes. Or it might not be. Like we just don't know at this point. And David Ayer does, for the most part, seem to have complete creative control over this, aside from the reshoots, and we just don't know how extensive that is to how much of a degree it would impact it.
Well, let me ask you this: if it flops, what happens? What happens to Wonder Woman? Does it affect it at all? I mean, how many people are looking at these as a stream of in-universe movies like Marvel? Like, has that been burned into our heads to the point where the general audience is looking at it that way, or is it just us comic book fans?
I think the general audience is looking at it that way. I've had lots of people talk to me and ask me things like, okay, so what happens between Batman vs. Superman and Dark Knight Rises? I didn't see that movie. Like, but because there wasn't a movie, they're two separate continuities. Like people have it in their head that the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman are one continuity that all connect to each other. And when I told them that a Wonder Woman movie is coming out, they are thinking about it in the terms of, well, obviously it's going to be after Batman vs Superman and follow up there. But when it's actually a World War II period piece, like I think the public for the most part does think that this is one long story because of Marvel.
Well, and interestingly, like if you think that's far-fetched, I knew people that thought that were really confused about Batman Begins, and that it didn't seem to line up with '89, and that was before we had Marvel Studios.
Yeah, like I mean, don't underestimate the movie going public with these kinds of things.
But that's because it's one character and people just weren't accustomed yet to reboots. Like are people going to be paying attention enough and be savvy enough to even automatically realize that Suicide Squad is a part of all this? Like, will there be people that have no idea what that is when they go? Well, they probably won't go see it. But I mean, like that see commercials for it, and it takes them a minute to even realize that it's connected.
I've seen, because I've been trying to keep up with a lot of like the information, like the numerical information of what's been going on with DC, and I've seen some research about how before Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad was the most talked about thing on most social media websites as far as comic book movies go. And then after Batman versus Superman hit, that number went down by about 40%.
Wow.
And it keeps going down. Like
Wow.
study hasn't come. I haven't seen like another updated research from like at least 2-3 weeks now. But it's had an impact on the general audience. So people clearly are associating those two movies together. And but also considering internet speed, maybe they'll forget about that by the time like August rolls around.
I mean, if that has happened, I doubt it. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be, if they're thinking about it like that, are going to be nervous about that movie, and will probably at the very least wait to see what the criticism is like, what the reviews are like. If the movie is really good, couldn't you see something? I mean, obviously not straight up the opposite, but something like the opposite of what happened with Batman vs Superman, where your first weekend isn't great, and then the second weekend there's an upswing.
I can absolutely see that. I'm pretty sure that at the very least it's going to do well because people want to see Jared Leto Joker.
Yeah.
And regardless of how good or bad the movie is, if he nails it, there would be an upswing as well.
But you'd think just having the Joker in your movie would guarantee you a really big opening weekend, but if social media is responding that way, you gotta wonder what it's gonna do opening weekend. Like, does that movie have? Is it possible it doesn't even break 100 million its first weekend? Could that happen?
I suppose it's possible. I mean,
I'm just wondering. I don't know, and I'm also curious to know how they're going to release it. Because if they do the worldwide thing first week again, they're insane.
No, they can't possibly do that. That was a dumb idea to begin with.
That was crazy town.
It doesn't matter what you're releasing. You don't do that. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, that was. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
What was the conventional wisdom there?
Well, according to Wikipedia, Suicide Squad will be released August 5th, 2D, 3D, IMAX, 3D worldwide on a...
What?
So, okay, I guess they don't realize that's a dumb idea.
Wow. They don't think that had anything to do with why that had such a percentage drop the next weekend.
I've heard a lot of people talk about this. I think it's worth explaining that if you make it so that your movie is released everywhere at once, there's always going to be a drop-off because there's no regions to keep that movie constantly in the box office top 10. There is no like new audience you're appealing to every couple weeks, which is why Civil War made the money it did as quickly as it did.
And
like,
also,
it's ridiculous to think that you could do that with a comic book movie.
In our internet culture, where we're all much more connected throughout the world, that is really useful.
Yeah.
Right? Where like you hear people talking about it in one region, and then next weekend it opens somewhere else, and then you just keep it in the public consciousness. It just seems like releasing it all at the same time, you wouldn't have the same buzz, and if it's bad, it just seems like that hurts it a lot more.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even if it's good, even if it's a great movie, it's not going to have legs. You can't get it to stay in theaters longer than 3-4 weeks max.
I mean, unless it's Star Wars.
Unless it's Star Wars.
See, that's the thing, is that
a staggered release. Even Star Wars was out in different markets over the course of a month.
Well, sure, but that's because Disney has this figured out, and they release all their things that way.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you release,
but you'd think Warner Brothers would have a base strategy for this.
Well, I mean, they released. I think they released Dark Knight that way, or at least most of the Dark Knight trilogy that way.
I mean, unless Warner Brothers' strategy has always been release everything worldwide first weekend, but I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true either, because that's just
I've
goes
never
against
looked into
common
this
sense.
Because it never occurred to me that anybody would do it like that. I mean, well, now, or at least for a big release. Like, to be fair, I feel like I have seen commercials throughout my life where things would be like opening in theaters worldwide. I mean, I think I've seen that, but
for smaller
this,
things,
it sure seemed like a weird counterintuitive thing, especially because Marvel releases their stuff in other regions early.
Yeah.
Before they release it in America, and that seems to work really well for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a smart move. If you're releasing something that's like a standalone Oscar bait or just like a Hollywood filler romantic comedy kind of movie, then you can afford to do it worldwide because it's not about legs, it's about initial box office.
Yeah,
with something like Batman versus Superman or like any sort of franchise movie, you want it to dominate conversation, and the only way you're going to get that is if you release it staggered.
Well, let me ask you this now. It's weird that Suicide Squad is going to release that way if that is indeed what they end up doing. But was it overconfidence? Was it like there's going to be so much demand for that? Like they thought they were releasing Star Wars. Like, and here's the thing. So did I.
Yeah, no, it's as much as down as I was on that movie before it came out with Batman vs Superman. I still said it was going to break $1 billion, and it didn't.
And I thought it would do it quickly too.
Yeah, so it's for Batman vs Superman. I can see that being a mistake on their part because they, like any reasonable human being, assume Batman vs Superman would make $1 billion.
Yeah, like that's understandable. And if they had another movie, it would have.
Yeah, and I mean, the way they had these structured before that movie came out with the whole idea of Batman vs. Superman, then Suicide Squad, then Wonder Woman, then Justice League, then Flash, like they had a system of like every 6 months you get a movie. And so it would have been a smart move for the big tentpole things like Justice League and like Batman vs. Superman. But to do that for something like Suicide Squad that is itself a risky property, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so I'll go back to my question from earlier because I don't think we ever quite answered it. If Suicide Squad tanks, what happens to Wonder Woman?
If Suicide Squad tanks, Wonder Woman goes through massive reshoots or recutting.
You think, like, no matter what happens with it? I don't know about that because those are presumably vastly different things.
Presumably, but there is going to be connection to Gotham and stuff in Wonder Woman. It's going to pick up on, it's going to like answer plot points that we see in Batman vs. Superman. I think if Suicide Squad tanks, they're going to try and make those like answered mystery scenes as minor as possible and just keep it to Wonder Woman is in her own context and we're going to ignore the fact that there's a larger universe.
That's a great point, man. That could be potentially disastrous.
It'd be reverse Iron Man. It'd be reverse Iron Man 2, and I don't know how that works.
See, I didn't realize that. I mean, I had heard about the Gotham thing, but I didn't realize that it was supposed to answer any plot points from anything. Does that mean the World War I stuff is gonna just be flashbacks? I don't know that that's the way to go.
Well, the idea, from what I've understood reading about Wonder Woman, is the picture we get of Wonder Woman in World War II with Steve Trevor. We're going to build to that, and we're going to build to where that comes from and how, and then not answer in the movie how Lex Luthor gets the picture, but why Wonder Woman goes into hiding and like try and explain why she was gone after that battle and like explain those plot points of Batman vs Superman with that movie.
Boy,
and
I could really
see Wonder Woman in World War I story.
I could really see a present day framework.
Yeah. I imagine.
Really likely what they'll do. Okay, so if so forgetting whether or not we get reshoots and stuff, what does it do to the box office of Wonder Woman?
See, Wonder Woman is I think a different case than most of these because Wonder Woman has been promised more exposure for decades and has never gotten it. I think regardless of how these movies do, Wonder Woman does well, at least initially.
I don't know what does well ends up meaning because it's gonna, of course, just like with Batman vs Superman, because you've certainly heard people say, well, it made $800 million. How's that not successful? It's like, well, based on how much it cost to make and all the advertising and stuff, it didn't do what they projected. And the fact that Warner's has had all the shakeup tells you that it just like we heard months ago, that movie had to break $1 billion to even be worth being made.
Yeah, and I mean,
and it wasn't. So I don't know what Wonder Woman is going to have to do, but like I don't know how well that movie does. That's not going to be $1 billion movie. It might be a $500-600 million movie. It needs to not cost too much.
I'd imagine it probably won't, but Wonder Woman's already had production trouble where like the original director left citing creative differences. Are
you noticing a pattern here, Steve?
Yeah, it's
I'm not saying directors have left every time, but there's been just nothing has been smooth.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. The smoothest they've had is David Ayer with Suicide Squad until we got word of reshoots.
Nah, I'd make the case that the smoothest we've had is Man of Steel. I didn't hear about it any crazy production stuff with that movie.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't remember anything crazy with that
at
either.
all.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a while, so yeah, I'd probably give you that.
That seemed like a pretty smooth production. I don't know that anybody working on it really knew what they were making.
Yeah, no, yeah, and it just goes back to the whole idea of that started with a vision and didn't have baggage.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even... it got far enough away from Superman Returns to not even worry about what people thought of that movie. They just made a movie.
So, speaking of difficulties in production. What else do you want to say about Justice League?
Um, I think the only other thing I want to mention is we know that we've got rumors now that Darkseid's not the villain for this movie. It's going to be Steppenwolf, which I think is a cool move because I love Jack Kirby. But if you screw up Batman and Superman, I don't know how you make Jack Kirby work. So I have no faith in them pulling that off.
I mean, it's kind of neat because that's a villain that a lot of people don't know anything about. But my worry about it is that it could feel like just a bunch of unnecessary lead up to the main event.
Probably. People have criticized that with Marvel and Thanos. Like, we've been stringing that along too long. If DC follows suit, that might be a problem for them.
Yeah, but the difference is Darkseid. First of all, maybe I'm wrong about this. I feel like Darkseid is a character that is more in the public consciousness than Thanos has been. Just because of, like, cartoon shows and stuff.
Yes, I'll give you that. The difference just being that Darkseid was artificially made that way. Like, Darkseid after Superman the Animated Series was like shoved at people to be Justice League in public consciousness, and Thanos was always there naturally.
Yeah. No, that's true. I'm just saying that, like, I could see it really being a problem where that whole movie feels like just a big giant lead up to the main bad guy, to the main event. Whereas Thanos, yeah, I mean, it's been forever and he's like lingering there in the background, and we have like a scene of him in Guardians, but he's just this like background orchestrating things character where if the general public doesn't know who he is, they're not even going to think to be irritated by that.
No, that's true. Even if you don't read comics, people tend to think Justice League versus Darkseid.
And I'm not saying we're there yet with Darkseid, where, you know, you see a symbol in Batman vs. Superman, people aren't going to know what that is.
Yeah.
So, like, that's not really a big deal. But if Steppenwolf is lame, I could see retroactively people being really annoyed about it. Like, if Steppenwolf comes off as really lame and kind of like a henchman who got a movie, like, I'm afraid it could be that.
And see, that just goes into me not having faith in doing that villain right, because the mentality would be Darkseid's our big bad. Let's throw Steppenwolf out as his lieutenant, and we don't give that character his just due. Despite Steppenwolf being Darkseid's uncle and having a fascinating history and being a really powerful character, and you're just going to make him a punching bag if that's what's going to happen.
But we'll see. Given that they set up cosmic stuff the way they did in Batman vs. Superman, which really surprised me, I could see going full-blown New Gods.
I don't know. I feel like it's too complicated for them to pull off.
I don't know that those people right now ought to, but I could see them trying to go. I could see them getting, you know, really ambitious and trying to go there. I don't know. But, like, I wouldn't have expected Steppenwolf. I would have thought maybe, like, Despero.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Despero would have been fun.
Or I could have seen... See, that's the thing, is, like, I second-guessed that pronunciation, because I've always said Despero, and I was like, I'm sure that's wrong, so I said it the other way.
I've always said Despero. I don't know.
But, leave a comment. We'll take a poll. Is it Despero or Despero?
I'm just going off Justice League Animated Series pronunciation.
But I also could. I mean, like, if you're gonna have a character that like deals with or works with Darkseid, but Darkseid's not your main villain in that movie, I could have even seen Granny Goodness.
I could have seen that. Yeah.
Although Granny Goodness doesn't usually leave Apocalypse.
She doesn't. She's more of a trainer. I mean, I think another option would have been Brainiac.
But see, that's so obvious. I'm almost impressed with them for not immediately going to Brainiac.
I feel like...
Not saying I don't want to see Brainiac, it just seems like the end of every, like especially animated things, like on-screen things that aren't big screen, seems like the end of nearly every introduction to Superman or Justice League is always, here comes Brainiac!
That's fair, but I feel like the public doesn't know that. The comic book people do, but if you just go to a normal Moody audience and you ask them about Brainiac, they won't know it in the way they know Darkseid.
I think he is even more well-known than Darkseid is to people.
Outside of comic book fans, I don't think so.
No, I think so, and I partly say that because of Smallville.
Maybe.
You got Justice League Animated Series, you got Smallville, like that seems like... And I'm with you. There are a lot of general audience people that wouldn't know that, but people your age or my age that aren't big comic book people but grew up with superhero media know who Brainiac is. That's going to be a much larger percentage than people who know who Thanos is.
Well, I think that would just back my point more if that's the case of then Brainiac would be a better hype up villain to go with.
Oh, he would be a hype. I'm really surprised if that Steppenwolf thing ends up being the case. Now, I realize that there was that deleted scene, so that's likely to be exactly what they're doing. But boy, that seems counterintuitive.
It is really weird. Because I like Steppenwolf a lot. I love the New God stuff. It's just a matter of like, they're gonna reinvent this to make it work in their context.
Yeah, I'm not even saying it's a bad idea. Like I said, it might be cool to like hype up a villain nobody's heard of and make him awesome. But there have been Marvel movies where your general audience wouldn't know that villain, and then that villain ended up also being kind of lame. So,
I mean, it's a risk regardless of how you do it. I think part of the safety might be you get a lame villain, or you do Steppenwolf and you do him poorly, but you make that a smaller threat because you're trying to do a character piece with the Justice League and salvage your universe.
Well, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, if that's what their logic is, if their logic is we don't want to do Darkseid right now because we need to get our ducks in a row, then fine. Completely understandable. All is forgiven.
This won't happen, but there have been, and again, I realize that general audiences won't necessarily have seen animated Justice League movies and stuff, but man, so many Justice League Origins, I would love that movie to just open up with the team is already together. Like, that stuff, like Batman and Wonder Woman at the end of that movie, gonna go put together the Justice League, I could stand for that to happen off screen.
I don't need to see it. I don't think that's particularly unique or interesting.
Now, they could make it really interesting, but right now where I'm sitting, I mean, I'm open-minded, but where I'm sitting right now, I think that could happen off screen.
And especially considering that they want to be counter to Marvel, why open your movie with a roundup scene like we did with Avengers instead of just going with your team is there?
Or heaven forbid, the whole first 2 acts are that.
Yeah.
Because we've already seen those characters. I mean, like that would, I mean, as shoehorned in as that stuff was, and it didn't really feel like it belonged at all, that will still look better if the next movie is just, and they're already together.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a time, because what we have here, because we'll have Suicide Squad and then we'll have Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman takes place in the past, and then you'd have like a 2-year gap between Batman vs. Superman and Justice League. You acknowledge that gap and just say, since the death of Superman, this group called the Justice League has come up and tried to make a world a better place and fixed everything that Superman couldn't have done on his own, and we like get our classic DC universe in the interim of those movies.
Well, what's Superman been doing in those last 2 years? We got the floaty dirt stuff. He's probably been buried for a day before he comes back to life.
That's another.
Unless that happens like way later, like the shot you see at the end of that movie is not where it feels like it probably is in the sequence. But I don't know.
The way it's cut, it makes you seem like he just like immediately gets up.
Yeah, I mean, just the way it's cut. Now, like, I'm trying to remember what that shot looked like, because like, was the grave filled? Because if the grave isn't filled, then it has to happen then.
The grave, I don't think it was all the way filled. No.
See, if that's the case, then, well, he comes back to life right away, or he wasn't even dead.
I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen it, but like the way it's cut, it looks like you have to acknowledge it immediately.
And if that's the case, we should never do Kryptonite again, because you're never gonna be worried that Superman can die from Kryptonite.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Again, not that I'm overly concerned with Superman's safety and stuff. You can tell a really great story and not get into that. But like, you stab him with a kryptonite spear, like, he shouldn't even be able to fly with it. Can I just throw that out there?
I mean, that just goes into the whole thing of, hey, Wonder Woman, you could grab the spear and stab him in the face.
It's not, yeah, there's no reason he had to do that. Once again, we're reviewing this movie. I mean, it's not flying a kryptonite mountain bad.
No, it's nowhere near that bad, but I'd still put Superman Returns way above Batman vs. Superman.
I'm not going to sit here and rank them. I'm just saying that, like, I question that, and then, of course, my mind immediately goes to, well, Kryptonite Mountain, but is that the standard that we're gonna, measure these things by? Okay, we've been at this well over an hour. What else should we talk about that we haven't gotten to yet? We've got, oh wow, there's lots of other things, aren't there?
There's lots to cover.
we
I
could
figured
bring
that
up.
the big thing that maybe we should address at the very least is Booster Gold movie and Harley Quinn movie. Or we
Yeah.
talked about Harley Quinn, but at least Booster Gold movie.
So we know that beyond Justice League, we've got the solo The Batman movie, and I'm gonna keep saying it like that.
I love that music. I wish that was the standard.
And then we've got, and I love that for the title, by the way. I'm really
Yeah.
into that idea. And then the Harley Quinn movie, which is being talked about as being another ensemble cast, maybe kind of team up thing that's all about the female characters in DC. And we've been doing a lot of this stuff lately with merchandising. Doing a lot of, hey, look, DC has women characters. And sounds like that's what they're going to do with this movie.
If it's another dream that will never get fulfilled, I would love adaptation of Gotham City Sirens. Get Paul Dini to come in and write it.
Well, you know that was the first thing I was going to say. And use that to introduce the Riddler.
Use that to introduce the Riddler. Use that to introduce Poison Ivy. Do stuff with Catwoman there, and make it independent of Batman. That would be great.
If we're gonna make this all about DC, because it sounds like if it's supposed to be about DC female heroes and villains, might it be like a female Justice League versus a female Legion of Doom? Like what characters would you hope to see there? That it might be cool to get Zatanna in there. Like there's certain characters that you wouldn't think you'd see that would totally make sense to bring into a movie like that, I guess.
Assuming the Justice League Dark movie is still happening, Zatanna would show up there. But assuming it's not happening, I would love to see Zatanna in a movie. Period, because she's one of my favorite characters of all time.
Dude, the Justice League Dark movie is never gonna happen.
I did probably not. I know, but I kind of wish it would. But like
I get okay. I never say never. I mean, like if they get their ducks in a row and this stuff starts taking off, it could.
But yeah, so Zatanna would be cool. Another thing would be, if we're doing Darkseid New God stuff, then it would make all kinds of sense to have Team Harley against the Female Furies.
Can I tell you that? Let me just say, I don't like this over what I think they ought to be doing. It's just me personally. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this kind of flip thing where, and who knows what they're doing with Harley Quinn? Like if they try to make Harley Quinn like a big superhero character. I mean, I kind of hope they don't do that. But, like, this might not, end up making sense. But what if they did this, like, flip thing of what they're doing with Harley and the Joker in Suicide Squad, and you did a Birds of Prey movie where Harley Quinn was your villain?
I mean, that would be amazing.
That's what they ought to be doing, I think.
I agree. That would be perfect. I don't want a Harley Quinn movie. I'm just trying to think of the best possible case scenarios of what would happen there. But, I mean, Birds of Prey would be a much better idea.
And again, here's the thing. I don't necessarily mind the idea. I know she's super popular. I mean, I don't mind the idea of a solo Harley Quinn movie, especially if you made it kind of a Gotham City Sirens thing and you just sold it on her name because she's popular. And maybe that's sort of what they'll do. Who knows? I mean, Poison Ivy and Catwoman are almost certainly going to be in that movie. Or at least I would imagine. Who knows what they'll do? But
at least Poison Ivy.
You're gonna make a big deal out of female DC characters, and you're gonna make it really Batman heavy. I want Birds of Prey again. I loved that TV show. I know it had issues, but it was a lot better than Smallville, and I would like to see that team get another shot at screen.
Especially considering that we have an established Batman where Oracle might already be a thing.
Oh, yeah, especially if that's the case. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. I mean, we don't know that yet, but that...
We don't, but I mean, considering the fact that he's already lost to Robin, maybe he's got an Oracle.
Well, and the thing is, we're talking about a universe where we already know we've got legacy villains and heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, or at least legacy heroes at least. So, I mean, like, you could be on your second or third Black Canary. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you could do with that.
Yeah, I mean... It's a big mess of potential. It's just a matter of...
That's not to say that movie doesn't have potential, too. It's obviously going to be sold on Harley Quinn.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. There's lots of things you could do here, and it's potentially exciting. It's just a matter of, like, DC needs to build our faith before I'm really hyped about this.
So what do you think about Greg Berlanti directing the Booster Gold movie?
Can I just say no? Because I don't like Greg Berlanti at all.
No,
I don't think he's...
I know you don't.
I hate him. I love Booster Gold. I love Blue Beetle. I don't want him anywhere near them to where he can set my hopes up and then make them crash down like he does with Flash and Legends and Arrow.
Steve doesn't personally hate Greg Berlanti. It's not personal.
Yeah, I don't want him to do that. I want a Booster Gold Blue Beetle movie. That's a amazing idea. That's like one of the best ideas I've ever heard. Don't make Greg Berlanti do it.
But at least he's not writing it.
At least he's not writing it, but the guy they have writing is like a work for hire kind of writer that just kind of does random touch-ups of most scripts anyway. So I don't know how much more of a comfort that is.
Yeah, that's fair. And then isn't it weird that we still have Black Adam casting for Shazam with Dwayne Johnson, but we still have no idea who Shazam is?
Yeah, I think he was announced as Shazam at least 2 years ago.
You mean as Black Adam?
As Black
Adam?
Yeah,
a long time ago, and I guess this is still happening.
Yeah, he was announced at least 2 years ago. Shazam is not scheduled to come out until 2019. There is going to be an entire group of elementary schoolers that have been the children have been born and gone through elementary school before that movie actually comes out.
You're stealing the thing I always used to denote time passing, Steve.
Freddie will
I usually do it with high school.
Freddie will probably be going to middle school by the time that movie is out.
No, he won't.
Okay, not middle school. He'll be in the second grade.
Yeah, that's like, and then there was that rumor for a long time that movie was like not gonna be in this continuity. I think now we know for sure that it is.
Yeah, it's gonna be there. We'll just see whether or not it actually.
Wouldn't it be weird if DC Films made movies outside of its own continuity?
I think that'd be really cool. I mean, just embrace.
Especially if they did Vertigo stuff and things like that. No, I'm with you. I just think it would be weird if they did things that are usually part of DC canon proper, and then they were like, no, that's too lighthearted, or that's too this.
I mean, I think there's a lot of characters that are just inherently part of DC's universe by necessity that work better by themselves.
Well, I mean, that's fair.
I think Shazam is one of them.
But, I also think that there are cool things to do with him inside of the DC universe proper, though.
I agree.
Maybe you could do, I don't know, you wouldn't do this. You could do both, but you wouldn't do both. You're already taking a chance by making a Shazam movie. I think it's cool they're doing that. But when Dwayne Johnson says, as Black Adam, I want to fight Superman, I'm like, yeah, and I want to see Superman and Shazam on screen together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that'd be great. I just, if you want to make like a 30-minute adaptation of that DC special we got of Black Adam and Superman and Shazam fighting, go for it.
Yeah, sure. And it'll be really interesting to see the kid they get to play him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's another thing with just Hollywood in general. We actually have a lot of good kid actors lately. I don't feel like that movie would be that as difficult to make now as it would have been, say, 10 years ago.
I mean, imagine what that's going to be like where you've got a kid and an adult that share a leading role and probably get even screen time, or the kid gets more.
That would be amazing. I would be really
Well, that's what it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you make it, if you make it what it sounds like, it has to be that. Unless you do a silly thing where you make him like a teenager or something. I really hope they don't do that.
I really doubt they do that. Part of the essence of that character is that he's a kid.
Yeah.
It'd be ridiculous to make him older.
If the CW did it, they'd make it a high school drama.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he'd be like Shazam, and then he'd be like 10 years older, and he'd be played by the same actor.
And then Shazam would not even be that much older. He'd just be more handsome or something.
If this was in Smallville, say Shazam, he'd look exactly the same, but they would constantly have characters talking about how different, about like, wow, or characters that found out that he was actually like, oh wow, I never would have guessed. That's a really great secret identity because you look so much older when you're Shazam.
The difference between Shazam and Billy Batson in the Smallville universe would just be a red leather jacket with the letter S on it.
Or just a lightning bolt down the back.
Or a lightning bolt down the back. He's bringing back the Grease style.
That's fantastic. He's got a mullet. Well, he's got a mullet, and that's a bit different. He doesn't have a mullet when he turns into Shazam.
Yeah, he's older intellectually, not physically.
It's a metaphor. Steve, anything else you want to bring up that we didn't touch on?
I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
We touched a little bit on, I think, pretty much everything. I'm just going to say that as down as we are here, DC on film has the potential.
I don't mean to be down. I'm fascinated
by
the potential future. I think, let me say, this is important. They're making the right first steps after what happened with Batman vs. Superman.
I agree. I think there's endless potential to make DC's universe fantastic. It's simply a matter of, as much of the shakeups as they had, I need some proof that they've learned their lessons. And that might be Suicide Squad, that might be Wonder Woman, that might be Justice League, and we just don't know right now.
Well, and also importantly, just because one of those is great doesn't mean that we're on the right track.
No, of course not. But like, there a change in attitude would be more evident after they get a good movie out and they get like their confidence flowing. They're able to do like Marvel style press conferences where they look like they know what they're doing all the time.
I just really hope viewers don't get that mentality of like, if Suicide Squad is really bad, okay, that's it, I'm done.
They've already gotten there with Batman vs Superman, so I guess we'll see how much of that goes forward.
I just, like, I don't know. This is tough because on the one hand, it is, of course, one continuity, and so they're going to affect each other, and you want to have a good direction moving forward. On the other hand, I want to look at them somewhat as separate movies, especially when they're made by separate people. Justice League being made again by Zack Snyder is, potentially a disaster. It might not be, but like, just because if Suicide Squad ends up being bad, I'm still gonna have hope for Wonder Woman. It's made by an entirely different group of people.
Yeah, and then Ben Affleck Batman, I still feel like there's no way you screw that up.
On the other hand, if you have 6 crappy ones in a row, you're just gonna lose people. I mean, that's all there is to it. Now, is that gonna tank superheroes as a multi-bazillion-dollar industry for movies? Not until Marvel has 6 crappy ones in a row.
Yeah, Marvel's built such a brand loyalty now that I think people can differentiate.
Jokes. I would hate that. That would be awful. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you saying, Steve?
Sorry, I was just saying, like, Marvel's built a kind of brand loyalty where I think even if people can't recognize that these characters don't exist in the same universe, they know something's being made by Marvel. And so the DC's failures doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think DC can salvage their reputation. I think Marvel would have to work really hard to destroy theirs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Iron Man 2 was very much not a well-received movie. Not a lot of people like it or care about it. But then right before it, we got Iron Man. Right after it, we got Captain America and Thor. And for the most part, people like those movies. And it's very difficult at this point for Marvel to not constantly be given the benefit of the doubt, considering how massive their universe is and how complex it's become.
Making 2 here pretty soon, 3 a year. They can risk it. They can have a dud every now and again. But you don't want DC to have, especially, and this is the thing I'm worried about, or at least this is the thing I was really worried about until they announced, okay, we're going to have a totally... This is the thing I think that was the smartest thing, Steve. Not just bringing Jeff Johns in and actually letting him make decisions. I think that's really smart. But also, we're going to have a dedicated, like off-branch studio. Yeah, that's what you should have done in the first place.
It's crazy that they didn't do it that way. And we should mention that...
I'm not saying just copy Marvel. That's a place where Marvel had the right idea. That's not copying them creatively. That's saying here's how you do this sort of business. That's huge amounts of money it takes to make those movies. You're going to try to do 2 or 3 a year. Yeah, it needs its own off branch.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say
sorry.
No, it's cool. No, I absolutely agree that is a good way to work with Marvel, and I think the other thing that Marvel had a leg up on that DC doesn't have to do, but I think it's just important to talk about, is Marvel had the phase structures. Marvel realized that the only way for their universe to work is to like slowly ease people into it. And DC wants to take advantage of the hype that's there consciously right now, so they don't have to do the legwork that Marvel created. So I think from at least from like a logical point of view, DC shouldn't have to work as hard to earn the public's trust. It's just because of Batman vs Superman and Man of Steel that they kind of dug themselves into a hole. At the same time, though, if they make a great movie, I think they could win people over really quickly.
Me too. I mean, like, you take advantage of it in the sense that the climate is there, and like your audience is ripe for the picking, right? Like, you don't take advantage of it in the sense of going, okay, Marvel already did this legwork for us, so we don't actually have to make people invested in our characters. Again, I think that, people are used to the idea of a shared universe, so they could have gotten away with starting with Justice League, potentially. You
I
just
think
got to make it right. That's all. But I don't think, and I think this is in a way, maybe not on purpose, but in a way, this is kind of what they did at least with Batman versus Superman, in shoehorning in their Justice League characters like that, just so they could get justice in the title and make a big deal out of that, and make it feel like we got there already. They're saying at that point, they're saying we can take advantage of that playing field by, okay, well, Marvel kind of already did our legwork for us, and we don't even have to give you like real characters. We'll just, throw some splashy things on the screen and have. I said this sounds really harsh, but a lot of people feel this way, and it's it's fair. I mean, I don't dislike that movie as much as Steve, and I think it's going to end up being a bad movie that I like a lot as time moves on.
Right.
But because I mean, as people know, I really enjoyed it the first time I saw it. I wasn't even sure if it was good, and was pretty sure it wasn't. But I think that they weren't, obviously, starting from the character place that they needed to, like Marvel was. So you take advantage of it in the sense that the stage is set. But from then on, you still have to tell stories and make movies.
What Marvel has essentially done is created its own like niche of like Hollywood. Like, it's not just superheroes are a genre, it's that superhero filmmaking is a style now.
Yeah.
And all DC has to do is play to the style, not necessarily like build everything from the ground up again. They don't have to act like they're a separate entity as far as the public's concerned. They just need to make things.
Well, here's the thing. That's the one thing I think that they kind of got right with Batman vs Superman, is that it's unique looking.
Yeah, it's unique looking. I will give them that. I think that, and this is like retract.
And I like how
this is the opposite of what I said earlier. I think I would still stave Justice League off for a few years, but it would have been, I think, for them smarter to not make Batman vs Superman and have just made a Justice League movie right after Man of Steel.
Well, and I wanted to make the leap and say that before that movie came out, and now I think that's probably right.
I think they could have outdone Marvel if they just made a movie about the Justice League comes to find Superman, and it's just interpersonal conflict between those two and no big bad guy.
And again, make it that heightened and that ultra stylized, because the Marvel movies don't look like that.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I love the Marvel movies, they have a very specific kind of classic style, and DC is very much adopting a palette.
Yeah, it's the real world turning into a superhero world that later on you find out that because of a lot of covert things was already sort of that way, but people just didn't realize it.
Right.
Like that's that world. Batman vs Superman is pure escapism.
Right.
That movie and that style is like nothing you've ever seen except for Watchmen.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's a lot of style over substance, but I love what it looks. I love how unreal it is. I love how surreal it is. I want that with good storytelling. I mean, I love everything. I want to live in that world. I love everything about what it looks like.
And again, you could, as much as I hate Batman versus Superman, I think you could take that movie and play out a lot of the ideas they thought they were dealing with there and use that same style and make better movies going forward. I don't think that movie destroys the universe. I think it's just a matter of public perception.
What I'm hoping they don't do is say, okay, we've got to like really ground it and make it look more like the Marvel movies. And I keep saying Marvel movies. We're getting more stylistic with particular properties, obviously.
Yeah.
And Doctor Strange is going to be probably the most strange movie, which is appropriate. But
yeah.
but like I just hope, and like different movies being in different pockets of the DC universe obviously should have their own styles and stuff. But like, if we're leading with what Batman vs Superman looked like, I really hope that they don't decide that was the problem, because I just don't think that was the problem.
And a lot of people were down on Batman versus Superman because it was so serious. The seriousness is not the problem with that movie. I think that I think Warner Brothers might latch on to that tone thing and try to at least ease up on that. But like you said, the aesthetic of it is fine. It's just a matter of making the material fit that aesthetic.
I mean, look, that movie felt to me like it wanted to, and I don't know if this is the case. When you listen to people that were involved in it talk about it, it sure doesn't sound like this. But just as I watched it, it sure felt like a thing that wanted to be a melodrama over a traditional narrative. And I just think you can get away with that. I think in DC especially you can get away with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to make this comparison. I think Avengers: Age of Ultron is the best Justice League movie ever. I think that's what Batman vs Superman in a lot of ways was trying to be and trying to do.
But couldn't you be okay with a crazy over the top melodrama?
No, of course I could. I think that's the thing. It's just like I think Justice League needs to go even more full tilt than that did.
Yeah,
and just make it like
Ultron,
straight up Greek tragedy.
But Ultron, just like the rest of those movies, is still more classic traditional movie making with these heightened idea. Like people are talking like normal real people. In Batman vs Superman, nobody's talking like a regular person.
Yeah, and you can make that work.
And that's okay. They can do that. It just didn't work there really.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a big fan of film noir. I love that style. That is nothing but melodrama. I can be made to love that instantly. It's just a matter of having a good script.
Anyway, anybody wondering if I never made it clear enough what I latched onto initially with that movie, that was it, man. And I want more of that. Just more coherent. You can do that and make it coherent. You don't want people to go to your Batman vs Superman movie and respond to it the way they did The Spirit, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I like The Spirit more than anyone on the planet except for my wife.
And Eric. Eric loves The Spirit.
And Eric. I forgot about that. And
yeah, Eric loves The Spirit. I like The Spirit. I don't hate it, but not as much as you guys like it.
He and I will have to do a commentary on that at some point. Anyway, well, Steve, are you good?
I'm good, yeah.
Is that gonna do it? Everybody, thanks as always for listening. We hadn't planned on going quite this long, but there was a lot to cover, and I had a good time with it, so thanks a bunch, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me and doing this. This was fun.
I know we're going to get a lot of comments on this. Everybody feel free to tell us what you think about any of the aspects of the DC extended universe. Is it extended or extended? I think it's extended.
I think it's extended, yeah.
Moving forward, and leave a comment, speak your mind. Looking forward to hearing what you think about any of my and Steve's ideas, our opinions, news, stuff that we talked about that maybe you hadn't heard about yet. And feel free to make some discourse happen in the comments. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan.
Can I ask a question to the audience before we sign out?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll just hold that thought. I am Captain Logan. Go ahead.
I am Captain Logan. I just want, out of curiosity, considering that there's so much potential here, can everyone just leave a comment if you feel like it of what is a character and director writer team up you want to see in this universe? I'd be really curious to see where people want this to go.
And what ladies do you want to see in the Harley Quinn movie?
Yes. I just, out of curiosity, like what in the DC universe do you want to fill the movie universe with?
I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxi.
Thanks a lot for listening, folks. We'll see you later.